rather have a stylistic experience in a video game than a cinematic experience. I think I'd rather have a 60 frame per second standard on this new generation of consoles than I would want 30 FPS. And I think developers should drop 30 FPS on games going forward and in the future. I think 30 frames is the thing of the past. I think that most gamers nowadays just want smooth gameplay and they want to have a fun experience with the games that they choose to buy. I know that most of the games that I play now are not visually great looking or visually demanding, and they're fun experiences that I enjoy. I like games like Metroidvanias. Like my last one that I played was The Last Faith. It was a pixel art game and it was so good. And I really liked that game. But I feel like developers nowadays are choosing visual effects over the performance of their games at most times. And a part of me is getting a little frustrated with this modern gaming experience. I bought my PS5 like about 3 years ago, and I was excited about it, and I am excited about having a PS5 that I can run games at 60 frames, and I haven't gone back to 30 frames since I've had the PS5, and I don't intend to go back. I think that stuff like ray tracing should take last priority before anything else that you choose to make your game with. I feel like there's an obsession with graphics over gameplay, and I don't think it's helping the industry at all, honestly. Yes, a visually impressive game will help sell your game, but if it runs like crap, then what's the point of having a really pretty game if it doesn't run well? I think developers should stick with stability first, visual second. Your art style will be determined by if gamers like it or not, regardless. You don't need the most realistic graphics in the world to get gamers to play your games. I think that really good graphics are nice to look at sometimes, but if it takes precedence over gameplay, then I think that's not a good thing. I feel like we should start really wanting more from our games because they're not cheap and they're going to get more expensive, and they have been. This talk of, rumors of games going up to $100 to be the standard, then if that's the case, then I want a higher standard in my video games too. I feel like this cinematic feel of these developers wanting to make movies instead of video games needs to stop. And that's my personal opinion on it, that all the ray tracing in the world is not going to get you to have gamers like your game. If your game is not good, they're going to let you know. I feel like developers need to focus on creating polished, stable games first. I feel like texture lighting and effects on games are what most gamers don't even look at anyway. Like, I don't go up to a rock and say, oh wow, look at all that detail on that rock or that piece of wood or that building or whatever the case may be. I say, oh wow, this game doesn't run really well. Oh, it's crashing. Oh, it keeps the frames keep dropping and all that. Then I don't think it's going to be a good experience. I know a lot of developers say, oh, they do 30 FPS because that for smoother gameplay, but I don't think that should be something that should be the standard. I think at least at the bare minimum for any game, should be 1080 60. And that's the bare minimum. And I know these consoles can do way more, and they can perform at way higher visuals than what I feel like a lot of developers are trying to do. Ghost of Tsushima, that game looked great on the PS4 towards the end of that generation. That was an excellent game. I even got the PS5 upgrade, and I was blown away. And there's not like crazy textures or anything, but the art style itself is what makes the game. And that's what I feel like you should prioritize first. I feel like Returnal's another one. That game was great. It upscaled to 4K. That was a 1080p game at 60, but it was upscaled, but it looked amazing. And I wasn't too worried about how much blurriness there was, because it was a really great looking game. I feel like the industry trends need to change, and I think that cutting corners on optimizations to meet visual standards is just not the way to go. I think that most gamers that I've seen threads on Reddit and videos on YouTube saying that they don't even choose 30 frames half of the time anymore. They go straight to 60. And that's what they came out with the PS5 Pro, and I thought they were going to drop, and they still got 30 frames in it. Like, you want the prettiest game in the world, but yet you still can't really perform at optimal speed with what you're creating. Then I think that you've lost the mark. I don't think that the visuals should take precedence over anything else. It's just not something that I personally feel is valuable to me. I do like when a game is visually impressive. It's cool, but to me, gameplay is first and foremost. Most of the games I play nowadays are older games, like Dark Souls. It now visually is not the greatest looking game in the world, but that gameplay, that smooth gameplay, I mean, especially the remastered on when it came out on PS4, was at least 60 frames, and honestly, I feel like it runs pretty decently for what it is. I didn't have any frame drops when I played that game. Dark Souls 3, that's another one. That thing runs at 60, and that game is so good looking. You don't always need the highest fidelity graphics to sell your game. I think that if you prioritize how your game runs and plays, that's what gamers will respect more than anything. But the question is, why are we keep getting these flashing games and that take precedence over stability? I still don't really understand why. I know it's probably easier to make games at 30, but I think going forward that it should be 60 frames should be the standard, the bare minimum standard, and we need to just drop the 30 FPS altogether. I don't think that it's gonna help the industry by staying stagnant. I think it's time to push things forward with the technology that we have that can handle the actual things that you're trying to create. Spider-Man 2, that game looked great, and it was at 4K 60. Was it native 4K, but it was upscaled to 4K, but that game looked great. It played really well. Demon Souls the same way. That game looked amazing. Demon Souls Remake, that game looked excellent. Horizon Forbidden West was a stunning looking game, and that ran at 60 frames, and that game is great. I know they had the option at 30 frames per second on that, but that game ran really well. I hope that in the future we can start looking past the 30 frames and just making 60 frames the standard, and that's what I feel like it should be. I know that for Horizon Forbidden West is kind of, the gameplay is kind of dated, and I get that, and that was my biggest gripe with it. I think that it's time to move forward in this industry, and I want gamers to want more for the games, and 60 frames should be the gold standard first and foremost before anything else. I hope that in the future we can get to that point where consoles don't have to be made fun of by PC gamers because we can't get past the 30 FPS mark. We just need to drop that altogether. Let's just make great games that run really well and just stop with the cinematic experience and just make your game run well. For some reason, this video was hard for me to get out of what I was trying to say, so I kind of struggled with this video, but that's just my thoughts on it. I think 30 frames should be a thing of the past, and that at least at the bare minimum, 1080p 60 frames should be the bare minimum. And I know that these consoles can do way more than that, and I think it's time to start prioritize optimizations in your video games. And then if you can visually pull it off, cool, do it. But that's all I have to say about how I feel about 30 frames compared to 60 frames, and I think that it's time for us to move forward in this industry. Thank you for watching, and if you like it, and I'll see you soon. See ya.